And it's important for us to know that the apostles were the first witnesses of the resurrection. No, they didn't see Jesus come out of the tomb, but they experienced the risen Lord. And because he was cooking them breakfast, he ate with them to show that it was not a ghost, but his body had been raised from the dead. The second part centers in on Peter. You know, during Holy Week, after Jesus was arrested, he was taken to different jurisdictions to be tried. And Jesus had said to Peter earlier, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And when people came up to Peter, when he was standing in the confines of the Praetorium or wherever Jesus was taken, he was asked, aren't you one of his followers? No, I don't know the guy. That's Peter's response. Did that 3 times. And he heard the cock crow. Peter and Jesus were friends. And what he did, he turned his back momentarily on a friend. And that had to hurt him tremendously. And so in the gospel we read today, Jesus, in a sense, is forgiving Peter, asking Peter 3 times, do you love me? And Peter responded, yes, you know that I love you. And he did. Well, there was a healing that went on between Jesus and Peter. And I would say to myself, after that, I would expect Peter to really be faithful to Jesus no matter what happened. But we all know, don't we, that later on in his life, Peter was in Rome. And what took place there? Persecution. They were putting Christians to death. And Peter said, I better leave town. And he was leaving. He was leaving. The shepherd of the church at that point was leaving his flock. Tend my sheep? Was this tending the sheep, leaving them to suffer? And Jesus heard his friend. And his friend asked him, where are you going? Peter understood. He was leaving his flock in time of distress. He turned around and went back. And we all know that Peter gave up his life along with other Christians during that persecution. He stayed faithful to the end. I was thinking of that last night, and out of the clear blue, a name came to me that I hadn't heard in years. You see, I spent 2 tours of duty, so to speak, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The first time for 5 years, from 78 to 83. And at the end of that period, there was a man came up to me and asked me, do you know Father Stanley Rother? I heard about him, but I didn't know him. Some people think because I'm a priest, or all priests that are ordained know all other priests. That's not the case. But people might believe that. And so I was asked, do you know Stanley Rother? He was a priest that was just martyred in Guatemala. A few months before I was asked the question. I heard about him, but I didn't know him. And so last night, I went ahead and looked him up on YouTube. There's something I would just suggest you do today. Father Stanley Rother, R-O-T-H-E-R. Simple name. He was born in Oklahoma in 1935. He worked on a farm because his parents had a farm. It was during the dust storm that Oklahoma experienced. It was also during the Great Depression. And he worked the farm along with his dad. Well, He learned a lot. And at the time when he finished grammar or high school, his classmates were saying what they were going to do with their life. Some were going on to school, others were returning to the farm. He said, I'm going to be a priest. I'm going to a seminary. He was an ordinary guy. So he went to the seminary. And what happened? He ran into Latin. What else is new? He was a farmer. He didn't know Latin. He didn't do well. In fact, after the first year, they advised him, find another vocation. He wrote to the bishop a little later, and he said, I really want to be a priest. And the bishop heard the letter, and he said, I'll find a seminary for you. And he found a seminary for older men that might have trouble with Latin. Well, Stanley wasn't one of the older men, but he certainly had trouble with Latin. But he got through. And he got ordained just about the time when Oklahoma opened a missionary place in Guatemala. Well, after about 3 years of being a priest, he volunteered to go to Guatemala. And he spent a total of 12 years in Guatemala. And in his little town of Santiago, he really gave himself to the people. But the government had taken over and they were treating the people poorly. And so he had a chance to come back to Oklahoma. And when he was back, he thought of his parish. Like Peter, he went back. Like Peter, he died. They came at night, 3 men, broke into the rectory, found where he was sleeping, 2 bullets into his body, and he died. A simple man who served his people. Sometimes we don't think that a priest really cares about his people. But then once in a while we have proof that they do. And yes, he gave up his life. For the first 400 years of St. Thomas the Apostle Parish in Santiago, there were no vocations. Since 1981, when he was killed, that parish gave the church 9 vocations. 9 priests followed him. And currently there were 7 more in the seminary. By witnessing to his faith, other men were called and they answered. I would ask you, where are you going? He went back to be with his people. And why he gave up his life? The military came to Santiago and they told the people, they had a town hall meeting, and they said, we're here to protect you. And here's where a simple farm boy raised his hand and said, I've been here 12 years. We've had a good life, and our young men were fine. Now, since you're here, we're losing our young men, and we can't find them. They were being killed. And he says, that's because of your protection. Criticism of a military government caused him his death. And this was back 1981. The good Lord calls people to serve. And many times when we are baptized, we're babies. We don't understand that we are called to follow Christ. And we learn, at least we should learn, that sometimes it costs us. It costs us to follow Christ and even give up our life. We have a proud tradition of martyrs. The apostles, they gave up their lives. And we believe in the resurrection because they died for what they believed. Current people within our lifetime have given up their life for what they believe. We should honor our faith, no doubt about it. As I continue on with Mass, I'm thinking of Peter. I'm thinking of Father Stanley Rother. I'm thinking of all the many men and women whose names we don't know that gave up their life for what they believed. And simply, all I want to say is thank you. Join me in thanking those who showed us what it means to follow Christ.